Hi, everyone. Good to see you all. So we're going to make a start now. Now, on today's webinar, we are blessed to be joined by Latitude Group and Iana, and she'll be explaining more about the kinds of schemes that are available, why people get second residencies and visas and passports and so on. She has about 25 years of experience helping in this kind of thing. And just to let you know about the basic format of this webinar, I'll ask some questions after the end of this, including some questions I have and one or two of my clients have told me they have who can't be here today. And then we'll pass over to the floor in case any of you have any questions. So if you have any questions, even in the middle of the webinar, don't hesitate to write them down in the chat and you'll be the first in the Q&A session. So I'll hand over now. And I hope you enjoyed this presentation.
Thanks, Adam. Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm always a little bit dubious when somebody says 25 plus years experience, you know, that kind of gives the age away. But I suppose that that is why we have experience. So thanks for that introduction, Adam. I would like to directly start with probably the most important thing for a client. I think who we are and what we do can come later. But the reasons why clients come to us, or what motivates people, why are you all attending this webinar? Why do we have so many consultations? And our industry, just like everybody else, loves all the little acronyms. In this case, SMILE is the acronym we use, because this literally is valid for every single client that we have. Somebody falls in one of these little categories. And as you can hear, I'm from South Africa. And I always thought, all the years I worked in South Africa, I always thought we were so different and we were so special. And then I realized that everybody in the world shares the same concerns. So people's basic motivation for seeking alternative citizenship or residency is, in the first place, security. I think that's the biggest reason for most of us. Looking for security, a truly permanent alternative place to go should you ever have to, alternatives to civil war, political strife, personal security issues. The second one, mobility, has gotten a lot more interest in the last few years, when people realize that to be truly globally mobile, you need more than one citizenship. I think specifically with some of our American guests would have found in the middle of COVID, for instance, that there were many restrictions on people and on their travel. And of course, we hope nothing like that ever happens again. But it certainly created that knowledge that the more residencies or citizenships you have, the more mobile you will be, and the more freedom you will have in terms of your activities. Investment, of course, is a large part. When we work with people like Adam and his business, clients come to him because they're looking for investment advice, financial structures, etc. And a large part of the work that we do partners with the wealth advisors in terms of where people can invest to obtain second residency. I often get the first question somebody says to me is, I want to make a good investment. However, while I'm doing that, I was wondering if I could also get citizenship or residency somewhere else. So sometimes those two things work very well together. But this is also an investment in your future in terms of using this as an insurance policy to diversify your portfolio, not just in terms of investment, but also in terms of the nationality and residency that you have. Lifestyle and health is a huge concern for people at the moment. I live in Portugal at the moment, and I've just spent a little bit of time in Germany, and I was so happy to come back to Portugal because the air is fresh, the mountains are beautiful and green, the sea is blue, the quality of the produce is fresh, public services work, the climate is amazing, and people literally are looking for these kind of things when they move. Now, not everybody wants to move to Portugal, but people are looking for a better quality of life, a climate that's more appealing, specifically when you start thinking about your future retirement. Where do you really want to be in retirement? Healthcare, of course, then becomes important as well. And then for the younger folk are looking for education opportunities for their kids, and specifically employment opportunities. It's all good and well to have a great education, but if you don't have the passport or a residency permit that actually allows you to settle in that country, then that becomes a bit of a challenge. So those are the things that motivate people. So this slide I just put in to give you an overview of all the different citizenship and residency programs that exist in the world. There's probably 100 countries or so that offer programs in some shape or form, but this is where the majority of people go. The big blue countries for me are what I would call immigration programs. So these are residency by investment programs, but this is where you typically would invest if you actually want to relocate and live there, because the only way you can ultimately get citizenship in those countries is by getting your feet on the ground. Australia, New Zealand, the UK, the USA, Canada, those are countries where you actually need to make an immigration decision and then relocate. The pink countries are a little bit more interesting. These are citizenship by investment countries, where each of these countries have a particular rule or regulation that allows you to apply and has a specific route to citizenship. You don't necessarily have to move there. In many cases, you don't. If we think about the Caribbean programs, for instance, this work is all done remotely, and you can achieve citizenship through their citizenship laws without having to relocate there. And that makes you more global. And then we have the citizenship and residency by investment program. So those are countries, for instance, like Malta, where you can become resident and ultimately achieve citizenship over a period of time. So all of these programs exist globally. And why is that important? I think for us, one of the interesting slides is how we as a company mirror what we do for our clients. So it's very hard for a business to offer a good service in a country if you don't have a presence there. So the only reason I show this slide of where the Latitude Group and our sister company RIF Trust in Dubai, where we have a presence, is because this shows you that when we take you to a country, we can actually support you on the ground. When we offer a service in a country, we can offer the support both in terms of where the client is at the moment, because there's a lot of civil documentation and processing that needs to happen, as well as in the destination country. So once you decide where to go, we can support you, and we can support you at both ends. Just in terms of the Latitude Group, a little bit more academic slide, and maybe not always directly interesting for people, but I think this goes towards the credibility of the business. We have had, over the last 20 odd years, a lot of involvement in government advisory services. Some of our executive, our ExCo members have been involved in this industry for 30 plus years. And we've been involved in the creation, design, improvement of many of these citizenship programs, which means that we work on both sides. We work both on the government side, where governments are creating these programs because they're looking for new talent, they're looking for foreign direct investment, they're looking to change the profile of the people. Sometimes they're just looking for funding to do more development in the countries. And this is an important part of the work that we do, because we really do understand what it is that countries are looking for. So when we have a conversation with a client, we can match your skills, your requirements, your budget, what the family wants to do with the most suitable program that is available. This is an interesting acronym. One of my colleagues created this. He specifically loves to talk about speed as being the most valuable currency in the world. And I think at the moment, with the world becoming smaller again and people looking for global access, having that second citizenship or nationality really makes you more adaptable in the world. And if we all think about your current citizenship or your current nationality, how that affects your own life. How does that affect your socioeconomic security, the pace at which you can expand globally, where you can live, where you can seek a quality of lifestyle? And those are the things that motivate people to obtain second residency or citizenship. So if we just have a quick look through what this acronym stands for, I guess these are our little cheat sheets when we talk to clients, to say, these are the things that you should consider. And once again, it's the same for everybody. People from South Africa are looking for security, are looking for different opportunities for their kids, just the same way Americans are, Indian families are, my Nigerian friends, my Kenyan friends. Everybody is looking for more access. So security, in terms of mitigating your risk against political and economic and social instability in your country. If you have citizenship or residency somewhere else, you have that plan B in place. You have a bailout option. You can actually relocate. And where that is determined by what you want and what your budget is. Privilege, of course, being able to harness that international opportunities, improve your standard of living, access world-class healthcare in a potentially more retirement-friendly environment, depending on your age. I think people are also looking for exemption. When we talk about exemption, we talk, for instance, about education quota limitations. When you are applying for an international university for your child, many of these universities have quotas. And if you have more than one citizenship or more than one residency, you can apply under a different residency and potentially improve your child's access to that education opportunity. Endowment year, we just talk a little bit about how you can set yourself up to be working in a more tax-friendly jurisdiction, have access to different financing, different partnerships, global business expansion, etc. The last one is probably the most interesting for me in terms of dynasty or generational planning. So many of our clients look at this in terms of how can I set myself up now? How do I create the structure to make my child's future life better? So your generational planning, once again, when you deal with a financial advisor, that's a large part of the work you do. Isn't that so, Adam? When you sit with a client, a large part of what you do is what are we doing? How are we structuring this? And it's not just about your wealth, it's also about citizenship, residency. How can you put your children in a better position now to have a different life in 10 or 15 or 20 years' time?
Sure. Actually, I've got a question on that. In general, what would you say is the biggest difference between citizenship and residency? Because a lot of people get confused by all these different things like residency, citizenship, tax residency, and so on. So what would be the simple answer to the difference between citizenship and residency?
Yeah, that's a good question. And sometimes it is confusing because the benefits in many cases are very similar. So if we think, for instance, about citizenship specifically, when you obtain second citizenship or citizenship in another country, this is a permanent long-term solution that can potentially have different benefits, such as giving you an extra passport, allows you extra visa-free travel, and very importantly, it gives you the right to establish yourself in a particular country or in a group of countries. So for instance, if you look at the EU, that's a very good example where if you go through the whole Portugal process, for instance, and ultimately you end up with your Portuguese citizenship, you then have the right of establishment in the whole of the European Union. But during the stage that you only have residency, you only have the right to live, work, and study in that particular country. So residency restricts you to the one country where you have residency access, and it might give you additional benefits. So in the case of Europe, again, if you have residency in any one of the European countries, you will also have visa-free access to other Schengen countries. But residency in Portugal won't give you the right to live and work in Spain permanently. Residency in Malta won't give you the right to live and work in Holland, for instance. But as soon as you have citizenship in one of those European countries, you then have the right of establishment in the rest of the European Union. And very interesting, the Caribbean countries work in the same way. So when we look at the citizenship programs in the Caribbean, there's 5 islands that offer citizenship programs, and they're all part of the CARICOM states. So when you have citizenship of the one, you have free access to the other. So you could, for instance, have a St. Lucia passport and be allowed to live in Antigua. So that is the difference between citizenship and residency. It's in terms of access. And of course, once you're a citizen, you have the right to vote in a country. So while you're only a resident, you can't vote. So that's the main difference. I think you mentioned an important thing in terms of tax residency. Many of my conversations start with people saying, I want to make a good investment. And on the other hand, they also start with, I want to expand my business globally, and I don't want to pay tax in my own country anymore. Now, of course, that is not as easy to achieve. Depends on where you tax at the moment and what your tax residency is. But all of these are actually different concepts. So you can, as an individual, be the citizenship of one, have residency in another country where you are physically resident, but have your business being tax resident in a different country. So these are all different concepts. And when we start a consultation, the first question really is what are you trying to achieve? Are we looking at making your family more mobile, or are we looking at expanding your business and reducing your tax? Now, we are not tax advisors. I know Adam is also not a tax advisor, but we work with tax advisors specifically to create the right structure that suits the client in terms of their particular needs. So what is the most important thing you're looking for? Are you looking for a second passport so you can travel more freely? Are you looking for residency so you can travel around Europe and ultimately retire in Malta or Spain or Portugal? Something that's very interesting that people don't pay enough attention to is citizenship by descent. And we do a lot of citizenship by descent work. And that's another question we have to ask. And sometimes people have obvious surnames where you think, oh, there must be some Italian ancestry, or maybe Polish ancestry, or Irish ancestry. So we always ask that question and say, let's have a look at that first. Maybe you have the right to become a citizen of a country purely by descent. So those are the 4 different concepts that we work with, and we talk about when we have that first consultation.
Fantastic. And what kind of programs do you think are quite popular at the moment, or which have you dealt with maybe presently and in the past?
Yeah, there's I guess for us in the industry, it's always interesting. What keeps us up at night is not necessarily available out there, and people don't always know what's going on. What's been very topical in the last month or so in the citizenship industry is the fact that St. Kitts and Nevis, which is the oldest of the Caribbean programs, they launched their program about 30 years ago. It was the first one in the Caribbean to offer citizenship by investment. They recently, about a month ago, doubled their minimum investment criteria. They changed their compliance completely, and they are trying to kind of regain their position as the preeminent program in the Caribbean. Now, the other Caribbean countries haven't followed suit. Everybody is tightening their compliance a little bit, starting to, for instance, insist on having interviews with the main applicant. They haven't all implemented that, but that's not dissimilar from what happens when you move to the US or the UK or Canada. So they are just improving their compliance, which is good for us as applicants and as people using these citizenship programs. So maybe if I just look at the different options here. Turkey is a very popular option. Turkey is one of the few countries where you can apply for citizenship, make a real estate investment, receive your citizenship after a few months, and then have the right to sell that property again after 3 years without losing your citizenship. So Turkey has become quite a popular citizenship route for clients. But for those people that are just looking for fast mobility and not necessarily at the price tag of a Turkish investment, you can look at the 5 Caribbean island options: Antigua, Dominica, Grenada, St. Kitts, and St. Lucia. All offer citizenship and citizenship programs where you can invest either by making a donation to the country, or in the case of St. Lucia, they also have government bonds, and all of them have government-approved real estate options that you can invest in. So just an interesting thing that we always get asked about is these minimums that are mentioned here. This is the minimum donation that the government wants to receive after all the work has been done, which means for you as a single applicant, for instance, you are not going to just pay $100,000 to get into Antigua and Barbuda. If you are looking to make an investment in Antigua and Barbuda, you also have to take into account all the additional fees and costs that's applicable. So for an investor to actually finally get citizenship in Antigua as a single applicant, or let's use them for a family of 4, for instance, the total cost is around $170,000 to include the whole family. But if you come to me and say, I just want the quickest, fastest solution, and I want to pay as little money as possible because all I want is mobility and I don't really care about all the other factors, then as a single applicant, St. Lucia will be your cheapest option, where the total cost will be about $140,000. But sometimes it's a little bit more nuanced than that. People have to think about their families. Are they married? Will they get married soon? Are they planning children? Which of these programs allow you to add your future children without going through a whole new application process? Where can we include elderly parents? Where can we include siblings? So we really have to go through that whole process with the client to understand which of these programs works best. It's seldom as simple as give me the cheapest option and that kind of ticks the box and off we go. We have to take all of those factors into consideration. I think Malta is a program that is not often spoken about. And Malta has 2 programs. It has a residency program as well as a citizenship program, and they're completely separate. So the one does not lead to the other. One has to decide right from the start if you are looking for citizenship in Malta or if you are looking to just become a permanent resident. And the Malta citizenship program has got quite a hefty price tag, but this is really truly generational planning for families, where the families that are coming to us and obtaining Malta citizenship are doing it because they want to give their kids that European citizenship now and not wait for 7, 8, 9, 10 years in future to potentially obtain it through one of the other residency programs. So it's quite a bit more expensive, but it is the only program that offers you a direct route to citizenship in Malta, in Europe at the moment. So, for instance, if you've got a family with kids that are a little bit older, you can't wait for 10 years because they're already at university. You know they're going to want to start working soon. You need to know that that they have that European citizenship in place. Then we'll look at a program like Malta for them. I think this is just an overview. I've covered some of these. But these are kind of the typical reasons why we look at the Caribbean options. So they share these similarities. They all offer visa-free access to 140 plus countries. So this would typically be the UK, Europe, Singapore, Hong Kong. In some cases, Grenada, for instance, and Dominica also offer visa-free access to China. So for people that are very interested or already trading in those markets, those citizenships could be a good option. Grenada also has a very good school, so a university, the St. George's University. Antigua has the University of the West Indies. So we always have to look at those kind of little differences in terms of what it is that people want to achieve. But on a whole, you have visa-free access to Europe, to the UK. You have a passport that gives you access to 140 plus countries. The age ranges are a little bit flexible. Each country is a little bit different in terms of dependents that they will allow. The fees start at 100,000 and then goes all the way up to 500,000, depending on the real estate you're investing in. And these are the fastest way to obtain citizenship. So typically, between 4 to 8 months of starting the process, you can expect to receive your citizenship without actually having to relocate or visit the country. So it is a truly remote option when you're doing it through the Caribbean. And very important is they all have a Citizenship by Investment Act, which means that this is a completely legal pathway, and it's very clearly defined in terms of what you have to do, what documents you have to provide, what fees you have to pay to ultimately receive your citizenship. So that makes it very comforting for people when you can actually read that law that says these are the things you have to do, and then you will receive your citizenship. I want to just briefly touch on the residency programs. I have no doubt there's a few people in the audience that wants to talk about Portugal, so maybe we can leave that a little bit more detail in the Q&As. But Portugal at the moment, as you all know, is coming. The Golden Visa program that allows you to invest in real estate is coming to an end. We expect Parliament to vote again in the next few days, and then we'll probably have 2 to 3 weeks to execute those last applications. But that's only for the real estate option. There are still fund options available. So the price tag has increased to 500,000 euros for Portugal Golden Visas. All the real estate options and the lower cost options of 280 and 350,000 euros is now a thing of the past. There is a new program available that is the Startup Visa program in Portugal. And that has a price tag of 175,000 euros, where you have to be a highly qualified applicant. We match you with a university, we create a business, we start an incubation process, and you can still get a foot in the door in Portugal if you are an existing entrepreneur or have some business credentials. So Portugal always remains interesting. It is very backlogged at the moment, so it takes a long time to get your first residency permit if you're going the Golden Visa route, but the entrepreneurial visa route is much, much faster. The other two programs that are getting a lot of interest at the moment is both Malta's residency program and the Spanish program. So Malta is the fastest and cheapest entry point into Europe in terms of achieving permanent residency. So once you've applied for Malta residency, your residency card is issued and your residency is granted for life. But that residency does not lead to citizenship unless you physically move to Malta, live there for a very long time. It takes 12 years before you can apply for citizenship. So it's not an easy route to citizenship, but Malta is a great route to people just getting visa-free access to the rest of Europe and having a safe country where they know they will be welcome, where they can go, where they have a work permit, where there's good healthcare, where there's good education opportunities for the kids, great links to the rest of Europe. So Malta permanent residency is actually a very good option for people that are just looking for a foot in the door in Europe. Spain is a little bit more expensive. Spain typically has a minimum investment cost of 500,000. We have created a product where we fund part of that investment in return for some of the future yield on the investment. So we've reduced the price tag of a Spanish Golden Visa for a client to 350,000 euros. So sometimes that makes it a little bit more accessible and more attractive for people. Greece remains at 250, and then all the other countries still have their programs. Anguilla and the Cayman is a tax program. Canada and the UK are business startup programs. So you have to be very specifically interested in that opportunity. Adam, I think as a last slide, I just want to talk a little bit about the process that people have to follow. And this is the same whether you apply for citizenship or residency. There's always a consultation process, so it doesn't matter what people come to us and what questions they ask or what they say they want. We have to go through that initial consultation to understand what the family structure is, what the financials are, how much of your capital do you want to spend on this problem? Are you relocating, or are you just doing this as a mobility play or something in future for your children? So once we've done that whole assessment and we choose the program, then we go through a due diligence with the family to make sure there's nothing in your history preventing you from getting citizenship. And then, of course, all the paperwork comes. So the documentation, specifically if you're applying for citizenship, is quite onerous. It's a very thick pile of information that we have to compile. But we're very good at helping clients with that. Once we've positioned the application file and the funds have been transferred, we can submit your application. And then we just wait for the citizenship to be granted. In some cases, it's faster. Some processes take a little bit longer. So it's very clear when we start this process how long you can expect to wait. I think one of the nice things we do at the Latitude Group is the aftercare services that we provide, because sometimes people get their citizenship, but they need more things. They want to move to Portugal, for instance, or they want to move to Spain, or they have their Caribbean citizenship and now they want a bank account or a driver's license, or they want to buy another property. So we offer all of those post-achievement services for clients as well, which just makes it a full service. And I guess that's also where a relationship with somebody like Adam comes in, when it returns back to the wealth management side, where a client now has different opportunities to look at how they structure their global business.
Fantastic for that presentation. Thank you, Ian. Now, just a few questions I've got. When it comes to these residency and citizenship programs, so you had many different costs. Obviously, there's indirect costs sometimes as well. What's the cheapest pure residency program in the EU? Would you say it's more likely to be the Malta program, or are there some others maybe you didn't mention on that?
Yeah, Malta is typically is considered the cheapest direct route to permanent residency. In Malta, you have to make a donation to the government of 100,000, plus you have to either rent a property as a residential address or make a real estate purchase as a residential address. So if you choose the lease agreement where you just rent your residential address, your initial cost is the lowest it can be. But sometimes people will say, look, I don't really want to make a donation. I would rather make a real estate investment and hold that property for as long as I need the residency. In that case, you're looking at Greece as a very good alternative. In Greece, you can still get a golden visa for 250,000 euros. The additional cost or friction cost is quite low. The renewal cost is quite low. So it does actually become a very good program for somebody that just wants visa-free access to Europe and are happy to hold the asset. So I would say it's between Malta and Greece. The benefits are very different. In Malta, you get a work permit. It's a permanent residency. In Greece, it's an investment. You can't work, but as long as you hold the property, you have the benefit. So it very much depends on what people want to do with it.
Yeah, and also I guess it depends if they want to make a real estate investment or a donation and many things, because some people might want to, just buy real estate and get residency as well, which not all of them allow, right? Now you mentioned the Portugal program. We've heard a lot of back and forth. We've heard it was closing, then not closing, or closing for certain things. So what's the last update that we've got from the Portuguese government?
Okay, so yeah, I live in Portugal, which has been interesting, being so close to what is happening here. The government announced in February that they plan to close the program completely, but of course the government doesn't have the right to do that because there is actually constitutional laws in Portugal that protects these programs. So it's been back and forth a bit between the Prime Minister and the President. The Prime Minister wants to close it, the President supports it. The majority party has different opinions. So it's been back and forth between the two offices. And the President has now used up all his vetoes, so he can't veto the law again. And it's largely expected that sometime this week the vote will go through again. that will restrict golden visa investments specifically via direct or indirect real estate investments, which means that you will no longer be able to buy an apartment or a villa or a hotel development or a room in a student accommodation to qualify for your golden visa. The only route that will be available will be private equity or venture capital funds, and those in turn can also not invest in property or indirect property. So those will become funds, for instance, hospitality funds or lots of new energy funds. I've seen quite a few of that across my desk in the last week or two. So the fund managers are all starting to create different products to still comply with the Portugal Golden Visa. So the program isn't dead. The backlog is tremendous. It takes a very long time at the moment to get your first residency card. But if this is the route that you want to go and you can afford to make the €500,000 investment in a fund, then it's still a viable golden visa option. It's still the only program or the only country where you can make the investment and ultimately qualify for citizenship without physically having to live there. So that still makes it attractive for people.
And then country next door as well, Spain, you mentioned it can be from 350,000, but there's confusion online, I think, as well. Is it 500,000 or 350,000?
Okay, so the way that works, in a standard product, if you want to get a golden visa, you can make a €500,000 investment in any property anywhere in Spain. So there's no restrictions. You can buy residential, you can buy commercial, it can be a new build, it can be a renovation project. You can literally buy anything as long as it's property and as long as you pay 500,000. Now, if you do that directly, then you obviously receive the yield on that investment. So whatever it is, let's say we find you a beautiful apartment in the heart of Barcelona. You rent it out as an Airbnb, the yield will come to you, you own the property, and it's a standard real estate investment. If you don't have the €500,000 available, or maybe you do, but you don't want to spend all of it in Spain, you have some other things you want to do, maybe invest some of it with you, Adam. Sometimes people don't want to spend all their capital on this this project or receiving residency. We can do commercial real estate investments. We fund €150,000 of that €500,000 investment for the client. So we buy commercial property, we do a refurb on the property, the client invests $350,000, we put in $150,000. We then register a title deed for the client. So the client still owns the property to the value of $500,000. And in exchange for us funding that $150,000 to top it up to $500,000, we then take the yield on that property for the next 10 years. And that is how we make it cheaper for the client, but we take the yield on the property as a payback for the investment that we've made on their behalf. So that's a very simplified version of how it works. But what that does is it just makes it more affordable for people to get Spanish residency.
Okay, that's very interesting, actually. Yeah. And we've also had a question from the floor, and that's can you shed some light on the Canadian startup route?
Yes, we get a lot of inquiries for that. So we actually have a few offices in Canada. You have to, in terms of the current Canadian program, there used to be, maybe take a step back, until about 4 or 5 years ago, there was a program where you could invest in real estate and get your residency that way. But the Canadian government stopped that quite some time ago. That was in Quebec. And they've been talking about reinstating that. But the talk has continued for the last 4 or 5 years. So we know closer to actually having a real estate option again. So at the moment, you have to invest in a startup business in Canada. You can either you can only invest a percentage, or you invest in somebody else's existing business, or you invest in an incubator. And there's different options. Canada is one of those things where it's not just an off-the-shelf product where we take and we say, spend this money and off you go. We have to look at what a person's personal situation is. We look at what your business interests are. We look at what your experience is. We look at how much capital you have available. You would typically look at anywhere from 250 to 300,000 Canadian dollars that gets invested in a startup business. You will not own the whole business. You will only own a percentage of that business. And that is how the Canadian structure works. You can include a wife and children. You do, once you receive that approval in principle, so you make the application, go through the whole process. Once you get that invitation to go, you do have to move to Canada, and you do have to spend significant time there in order to ultimately receive your citizenship. So it's a very popular program. Canadian education institutes are very popular amongst our clients. People enjoy the freedoms and the liberties that you have in Canada. So it remains a good program. It's certainly a very busy office.
And we've had a second question. Is there a shift in the residency by investment to the Middle East, for example, UAE or Qatar or any other countries in the Middle East? Have you seen some people wanting to move to those countries?
Yes. I personally have residency in the UAE, have had for more than 15 years, maybe 18 years now. So I live in Portugal, but I've maintained my residency status in Dubai because there's just so many benefits to it. So our largest office is based in Dubai, and we definitely see a move from not really a move. People are getting residency there and setting up companies and setting up businesses there, but they also at the same time doing their European residency or their second citizenship. And the reason for doing both is that in the longer term, it's very difficult to receive citizenship in the UAE. There are special circumstances under which you can qualify, but it's by invitation of the government only. There isn't a route that says if you do ABC, you will get a passport and you'll be a citizen and off you go. So at the moment, you can get a 10-year golden visa in Dubai if you qualify under certain criteria. You have to either earn a minimum salary of 30,000 dirhams a month, make a real estate investment, start a business, etc. So there's a few ways in which you can do that. So it's typically a combination of two. I think the UAE is absolutely booming. We're not seeing people going to Qatar, not in terms of our industry. I think there's a lot of people moving to Qatar for work, and certainly a lot of them moving to Saudi for work because all the construction jobs have moved that way. But in terms of our industry, doing the actual residency work, we only do work in the UAE. So typically Dubai or any one of the free zones around there.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I've also seen as well.
Yeah.
From our clients and network, I think the UAE is attracting more independently wealthy people and business people, but Qatar and Saudi are attracting a lot of working age expats.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think people want to, you go to Dubai you go to the Middle East to make money, and it's a fantastic place to live. I lived there for 12 years and I love living there. But you can't ultimately get citizenship there. And for a lot of people, that's not where they ultimately want to retire. So if you're coming from a country that you also don't want to go home to, once you finish work, I mean, a lot of my conversations with expats living in the Middle East is, you know what, it's great here and we've been here for 10 or 12 or 15 years or 2 years, but we know that we can't retire here. It's also very expensive to live there unless you earn a pretty decent income or have large wealth. And people are concerned then about making the money there and having the lifestyle, but what happens after? Where do the kids go? Where do we educate our kids? Where do they find work? Where do we retire? So that's kind of normally a combination of UAE residency plus residency in a European country.
Yeah, very much so. I think some of the other countries as well, like Singapore as well, you can sometimes see that with some people. If you can't easily get the citizenship, then, for some people, that's a huge negative. Okay, everyone, does anyone else have another question? Oh yeah, one has just come up from Miss Anne. Thanks for the presentation. Is the turnaround timeline for residency citizenship merely indicative, or is it based on actual experience that you've had in the field?
Okay, I've been doing this for many years, so that would be that. I would have to say experience, but it also changes over time. So depending on how popular a program gets for whatever reason, you will see these turnaround times lag. So it typically takes us between 6 weeks to 2 months to put a citizenship application file together because it requires more civil documents. And if we submit a clean file, depending on the country it goes to, it can be between 4 to 6 months. So the Caribbean is probably where it varies the most. St. Kitts and Nevis had an absolute flurry of applications last year, and their processing times have now increased. But since they've doubled the investment amount, that time will come down again because they will initially not get that many applications. Grenada is still accepting, or was still accepting, Russian applications. So they had an enormous volume of applications. Maybe 90% of their business in the last year was Russian applications. So they are absolutely bogged down with business. And TIGA has always been kind of the mid-term or mid-length from a processing point of view, because their compliance is quite strict and they want all the original documents. So it takes a little bit longer to deal with them. So I would say they're probably about 6 months is a good estimate. St. Lucia is hit and miss. St. Lucia, we've had files submitted and processed within 2.5 months. And then sometimes you just it just takes a bit longer. So it's not an exact science. What I can say about Portugal at the moment, specifically because everybody asks about Portugal, the Portugal Golden Visa program is massively backlogged. Every time the government announces in the program, there's a flurry of activity and we get thousands more applications. And the only hope we have of them resolving this is the fact that they've moved all the renewals online now. And the whole team that used to deal with renewals manually is now focused on processing new applications. But if you're in a hurry to get a European residency card, then Portugal is not the way to go. It'll take at least 2 years. It's not a quick solution. Whereas if you go to Spain at the moment, your first residency card is stamped in your passport in your home country. And is valid for 12 months. So it doesn't get much faster than that. Malta processing is quite fast as well if we're talking about residency. So the Malta residency program, you can get a residency card within 2 to 3 months of making your application. So every country is different, and it changes. What we see today will be different in 6 months' time, depending on where the volume goes.
Yeah, absolutely. It can become quicker, of course, or often slower depending on the country. We've also had a question from Nick asking about the Italian scheme. So apparently, Italy by descent is one option, but are there other routes to residency that you're aware of in Italy?
Yeah, the Italian, probably the most popular route at the moment. We're all waiting. They've been threatening us with a real estate option, so you can have a proper golden visa investment, make a real estate investment, get your residency. But that hasn't quite emerged yet. At the moment, the most popular route is the elective residency program, but that requires your physical presence in order for the visa to renew. So you can make that initial. It doesn't require an initial investment, so you can qualify to become a resident in Italy. But in order to renew that permit after 2 years, you have to physically be there and live there and spend time in the country. So that becomes a little bit harder for people. We have an office that specifically deals with the Italian program. So it's popular. I think a lot more people have this romantic notion of wanting to live on the Amalfi Coast. But if you want the benefit, you have to then move there and live there. You can't stay in Dubai or South Africa or the US. You have to relocate at the moment to maintain the benefit.
Sure. And another question is, you mentioned donations to government with respect to some Caribbean citizenships. Could you clarify what that actually means?
Yes. So the governments call it a significant contribution to their own economic welfare. But from a client's point of view, it's a donation. So every Caribbean island has a different fund. Some call it a sustainable development fund. Some call it a infrastructure development fund. There's an education fund. There were COVID funds or post-COVID recovery funds. So what happens when you decide initially? So we sit and have a look at what is your available capital? What is the actual cost of making the donation plus paying the government fees, due diligence fees, application fees, etc., versus if you were to make a real estate investment, what is the additional cost? And once we decide on the donation route, sometimes clients just don't want to own property in the Caribbean, regardless of how easy we make it. Some people just don't want property in a place that they hardly ever plan to visit. So when you make that donation, typically what happens is we would have to assess when we start the application that the funds is available, that you have it available in your account. You make a deposit to the government when we submit your initial application, normally 10%. And then after they've done their assessment 3 to 4 months later, when you receive your approval in principle to say that you have been approved as a candidate and they are proceeding to offer you a citizenship certificate, then at that stage you have to make the rest of the investment or the donation. So if in the case of Antigua, for instance, for a single applicant, the donation is 100,000, and it is 100,000 up to a family of 4. Thereafter it increases. In the case of St. Lucia, the donation is 100,000 for a single applicant, but as soon as you add a spouse and children, the donation amount increases. So each of the countries work a little bit differently, and for each of them, there's a very, very specific and very detailed layout of exactly what the cost is. And the decision-making process really is for people, is about how much capital is available, and can they potentially do better by investing, instead of investing in real estate there, by investing it in a different project somewhere else, and just making the donation to get their citizenship.
And also, we've had a question from Nick. You mentioned the scheme in Italy. What was the name of that scheme you were referring to before?
The elective residency program.
Elective residency program. Okay, fantastic. Okay. Does anyone have any final questions before we wrap it up today? Okay, well, if anyone, we just had one more. If one needs to have a
leave the difficult question for last.
How can we reach you? Well, you can email me. That's no problem at all. I guess you'll have my details, and then by definition, you'll get access to Latitude as well. But I will be emailing you in the next few days anyway to make it nice and simple. So don't worry about that. I'll reach out to you to make it more convenient, I guess. And so you have both of our email addresses, really.
Great, thanks, Adam. Yeah, if anybody, I think if you have questions, just direct them to Adam, and then Adam will introduce you to me by email if you have specific questions or things we can help you with. I travel a lot, so I do get around the world. We do a lot of our work remotely now, which is great. But I do enjoy travel. So I'm off to Dubai and Kenya in the next week, and then I'm spending a few weeks in the US, and then back here, and then down to the Caribbean. So maybe I will find you in person in one of these locations in the next few months. So I look forward to hearing from you.
Yeah, thanks, everyone. It's a really good session today. A lot of questions. Sometimes we have these sessions and people are a bit shy about asking questions, especially if nobody asks questions. But today we had a really good mix of questions from the floor. So thanks a lot for that. And thanks all you all for coming, and thanks to Iana as well in the Latitude group. And yeah, I'm sure we'll see you again sometime.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Have a good day.